Chapter 5. Dub Dub FM made a feature of the wreck the next morning. Keith and Sally talked about it endlessly, although they added little to what Zack already knew, except for one exchange. Sally: Police are advising everyone to stay away from Otterenga Bay. Apparently, Mikhail Popanoff has signed an agreement for the salvage of the vessel. This means that taking things off the shore or fishing them out of the sea is illegal unless you're working for the salvors. Keith: What's this all about? Is there something valuable out there? Sally: Who knows? It's probably just something to do with insurance. Keith: Or there's stuff on that boat they don't want others to see. Sally: Oh, is this another one of your conspiracy theories? Keith: Not necessarily. I just think it's likely that a billionaire would have a few secrets hidden away on his luxury yacht. Sally: Yes, maybe. But we're not about to find out because security guards have been placed at the mouth of the Kerori stream and only authorized persons will be allowed past. Keith: That doesn't stop people going around by boat, though, does it? Sally: No, but didn't you say there's still a sea running on the south coast? Keith: Yes, 2-meter waves at Lyle Bay, which will have the surfies wondering whether they should go to work or take the day off. Sally: Maybe just take the afternoon off, Keith, as it's low tide this morning at 10:03. The high this afternoon is at... Crawford had been soaking his injured leg in the bath and had heard nothing about the ban, so he raised no objections when Zack said he was going to ride around to Otterenga Bay. He just warned him to be careful going around the cliffs beyond Cave Bay, where the shore platform was narrow. He also suggested packing some lunch and a mobile phone. The track down to the beach was closed by a padlocked gate. Zack could understand the need for the gate to keep the animals in their paddocks, but the padlock seemed a bit much, especially as he and his bike had to go over the top. The lock began to make more sense when he got down to the shore. It was almost as if the place had been set up as a 4-wheel drive adventure park. Vehicle tracks covered every slope, bump, and hollow. If the gate hadn't been locked, they'd be all over the farm as well. The towering waves of the previous day had lessened in the breeze, which was now blowing off the land. The mountains of the South Island were clearly visible, their tops white with new snow. Nearer to Zack, 2 inter-island ferries were about to cross, traveling in opposite directions. Cook Strait was once again open for business. The first obstacle on the way to Otterenga Bay was Wairiki Stream, which flowed out of a deep valley that divided the hills behind the Homestead Flats. Fortunately, the stream had split into many tributaries as it traveled over the beach, which made crossing it relatively easy. Zack noted that he was not the first to cross that morning. A wide vehicle had left wet tracks on the Otterenga side. Maybe the security guards had passed this way. Although the track was well used, the heavy gravel made it tricky going, even on a mountain bike. It was worse still crossing Cave Bay, where waves had destroyed the track during the storm. The cliffs that had blocked his view the day before marked the end of the bay. It was just on 10 o'clock, and according to Sally on Dub Dub, the tide should be at its lowest. And yet some waves were still surging up to the cliffs before flowing back in the rattle of gravel. The best Zack could do was hop off and carry his bike, rushing from rock to rock between waves. The track resumed on the other side, although it was not as clear as before, suggesting that fewer vehicles made it this far. He crossed several streams coming down off Outlook Hill before reaching the southern end of Otterenga Bay. It had taken an hour, and Zack was ready for a rest. There was no sign of the vehicle that had come before him, or of the people in it. In fact, there was no sign of any life. which was disappointing. On his way around the rocks, Zack had imagined finding a wolf, one which would come when he called the name Tasha. It had been a stupid thought. Chances were there was no wolf, nor any other animal. More likely, the pet who had eaten from the silver bowl was now dining out of a similar bowl in Sydney. There was more wreckage on the beach than before, although as yet there was no indication that anyone was trying to salvage it. Maybe the salvors were behind the cable building, near where the bowl was hidden. A clearer view was required, and the best place was further out on the headland. Although scrambling over the rough rocks wasn't easy, it yielded a much better view. Zack tried to stay low and hidden behind the bigger rocks, just in case somebody was looking his way. This required so much of his attention that he was only vaguely aware of a bad smell, until he put his hand on a pile of black, slimy stuff. Then the stink of animal poo was overpowering. "Yuck!" he cried, flicking his hand to get rid of the muck. "What's that?" Some of the stuff came off and splattered against the rocks, creating more of a stink, but plenty stayed stuck to his hand. He moved towards a rock platform where he thought there might be a pool tucked in among the rounded rocks, somewhere to wash his hands. He never made it. As he climbed onto the platform, he was greeted by a deep growl, the sound of a large animal. He ducked back down. Was this the animal from the yacht? It didn't sound like any pet he'd heard before. Cautiously he raised his head. Again, the animal growled. But this time, instead of ducking, Zack looked around, searching for the creature. There was nothing. Breathing deeply, he stood to get a clearer view. The growling got louder. Then a rock in front of him reared up, a mouth opened, and a roar of a lion filled the air. Except it wasn't a lion, not any sort of cat. It was a seal, a large bull who didn't like his morning snooze being disturbed by some puny human. Zack scrambled backwards away from the creature. This was a foolish move. He'd taken just 2 paces when his foot caught in a gap between 2 rocks, causing him to crash onto his back. For a moment, the seal was out of view, although that didn't stop the roaring, which seemed to get louder as if the animal was almost on top of him. Zack struggled to free his foot, expecting an attack at any instant. It never came. The roaring lessened to a growl. By the time Zack released his foot, the growling, too, had gone and been replaced by heavy breathing. He took a peek and saw that the eel had returned to being a rock. Except this time he could see the rise and fall of its body as it breathed. Leaving it to sleep, he moved away to find some water in a safer place. The smell hadn't been entirely washed away when Zack resumed his journey. Keeping an eye out for both humans and animals, he wheeled his bike along the gravel. For most of the way, the cable buildings were hidden behind the cliffs. There was, however, a clear view of the rest of the bay. There was still nothing to indicate any human or animal activity. If the vehicle had contained security guards, then they weren't doing much of a job. By the time he made it to the ramp leading up to the cable compound, Zack was becoming increasingly nervous about the ghostly absence of life. The humming noise coming from the buildings didn't help. It made him think of alien movies where secret things happen in buildings far away from civilization, like something out of Area 51. Perhaps it was no accident that the yacht had come aground in this bay. Finding the right gorse bush was not as easy as he'd thought it would be. There were dozens that looked all the same. In his urgency to hide the bowl, Zack hadn't considered how he would recover the thing. Now he realized he'd have to climb above the road cutting and search them all. Leaving his bike, Zack scrambled up the crumbling bank, feeling very exposed, sensing that eyes were everywhere. At the top, he crawled to the nearest bush where, despite the prickles, he hid with a sigh of relief. This feeling was short-lived. There was a movement in a nearby bush, followed by a loud, hissy growl and a flash of white as something shot away. Zach's heart stopped. What was that? He spun around, but all there was left to see was the swaying of the bushes where the thing had passed. His heart restarted, now thumping as if it wanted out of his chest. Then there was a rustling from farther up the hill. "Tasha!" he called softly. The noise stopped. Slowly he rose to his feet. This time he called the name louder. "Tasha!" Nothing. He took a few steps up the slope before calling again. "Tasha!" A bush moved, but no more than 10 meters away. "Tasha," he said in a soothing voice. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." The movement stopped. He climbed a bit higher before he spoke again. "It's okay, Tasha. I'm a friend." He stretched his hand toward the bush. "Come out and see me." He squatted down. "Come on, Tasha." There was a faint movement. "Yes, she's coming." But then a seagull chose that moment to let out its loud, raucous cry. Tasha exploded out from the other side of the bush, Zach getting just a glimpse of a spotted white body before it disappeared uphill. He stood hoping to see where she stopped, but this time she kept going, leaving a brief trail of swaying bushes. He saw her twice more as she darted between plants, each time just a flash of white, then nothing. Searching for the bowl took several minutes, long enough for Zach to think that Tasha might have taken it. She hadn't, although she had probably moved it, for it was well away from the edge of the track. Zach stuffed it into his backpack alongside his bike tools and lunch. He stood to take a look around the bay. All was just as quiet as before, almost as if his encounter with the animal hadn't happened. A short time later, he was back on his bike, heading around the bay. He would eat while he checked to see if anything new had washed up overnight. It wasn't until he rode around the north side of the building that he discovered that the vehicle had made the tracks around the coast. Tucked away in some bushes was a ute that Americans would call a monster pickup. All it needed was a set of horns on the bull bars, and it could have been straight out of Texas. After another brief moment of panic, Zach figured that if anyone was in it, they would already be shouting at him. But if they weren't there, where were they? His first thought was that they were in the cable building. However, the gate was shut and padlocked. Perhaps there would be clues in the pickup. The ute's tray was tied down with a black cover. It only took a moment to untie one corner and peer inside. It looked empty except for a shadow on the other side that was difficult to make out. Releasing more of the cover revealed the animal bed that Zach had seen on the beach. "Why just that?" he said to himself. "Why not other stuff as well?" Perhaps there was more in the cab. Standing